should be somewhat familiar with most of these proofreading symbols and or abbreviations. If you're not, now you will be. And it might be easier if you're going to take note of this, rather than copying these all down, just take a picture with your camera. So, easy ones to begin with. Spelling. Yeah, hate to tell you this, spelling is important, especially when you misspell a character's name that you're writing about repeatedly. Okay? It's college, folks. Get it right or don't do it at all. So, word choice. And let me preface this by saying, you know, I was talking to my daughter who's in high school, and she said, oh yeah, you definitely should take points. I don't take points off. When I grade, there's not a point system where, you know, this is, you know, 0.2, and I add up a whole bunch of 0.2s, and you end up with, you know, 2.8 points off of starting with 100. First of all, you don't start with 100. Nobody in here starts with an A+ to begin with. You start at the middle, C, okay? And you go up or down from there. Why? Because I'm assuming from the beginning everybody's average. Notice you don't start at the bottom either. You don't start with an F, you know, like certain religious groups, and you have to dig yourself out of hell to, not how it works. Okay, so, word choice. If I've got a WC on yours, or if you've had a WC on yours, that's not going to lower a grade. What does word choice mean? It means in the 2.whatever million words in the English language, there's a better word than the one you've chosen. Okay? Doesn't mean that the one you've chosen is wrong. It just means there's a better word in context. Sometimes, I don't promise to do this all the time, sometimes I will suggest a word that fits the context better. Okay? If you were writing a dissertation with me or master's thesis, yeah, I would recommend that word. And in some of yours, and I might be confusing you now with one of my other classes, because I was grading papers about the same time, you know, I go through and I cross out things and write things in. Why? I am a natural editor. I do that with whatever I read. If I'm reading, you know, I've got Sabriel in here. I've got places in the novel where I've caught errors. And so I circle them. Sometimes I've written publishers and they've corrected things based on that. And I get my name, you know, little acknowledgments. It's happened 2 or 3 times. All right? Word choice isn't going to hurt you. This one will. This one means the word you've chosen completely is just wrong. It doesn't fit. Okay? Here's an example. This is a boneheaded example. Okay? From and form. Totally different, right? Context is going to tell you that's definitely wrong. But if you are relying on your software's spell checker, it's not going to catch it. Why? Because spell checking software is dumb. It doesn't check for context. All it checks for is it runs the word in the database for commonly accepted spellings of words in English. Those are both commonly accepted spellings. Your spell checker will catch T-E-H. Why? Because that's not a word in the English language. And it'll recommend T-H-E. Or sometimes it'll come up with some other weird thing. Okay? So, wrong word means it's just the wrong word in the context. Okay? APOS. Usually I put this in. Sometimes I've only got the thing circled. Okay? Apostrophe error. Where do we use apostrophes? Primarily. What situations do we use an apostrophe for?
Somebody owns something.
Somebody owns something. The boys, B-O-Y, apostrophe S dog, or if it's plural boys, B-O-Y-S apostrophe dog. Where else? Contractions. And that's it. Entirely. we don't use apostrophes for plural. You don't use apostrophes to indicate plural. As I even saw the other day in I think it was a news article or something. And it was something like, it was referring to plural poets. And it had that. And I thought, my God, how dumb can you be? Copy editor, not the person who originally wrote it. Okay, yeah, they're mildly dumb. But the copy editor who allowed it to go through is even more dumb. Okay? So, apostrophe errors. Fragment. Sentence fragment. What is a sentence fragment? Hopefully you learned this in either 1010 or 1020. You took one of those. Or if you didn't, you transferred in from somebody else where you took something equivalent. But some of you might have not had to take it because of scores you got in AP English and stuff like that in high school. Sentence fragment means you have an incomplete sentence. Or you don't have a sentence. You have part of a sentence. You might have most of a sentence. But your sentence is missing either one of two things. A subject or the verb. Or part of the predicate. Okay? So, this often happens. Somebody says, so-and-so did so-and-so. Sentence is fine there. Period. Meaning, comma. Okay? Or, meaning that Harry was not smart enough to get through the potions test. Okay? That whole thing, meaning that Harry was not smart enough to get through the potions test, it's not a sentence. What is it? It's called a participial phrase. How do I know? Because the first word ends with that ing. Okay? Meaning that Harry was too dumb to do the potions test should all modify something else. How do you get rid of it? The previous sentence that the meaning thing is modifying, end it with a comma. And that whole meaning clause then modifies the previous sentence. Okay? You no longer have a sentence frame. Agreement errors. These are becoming more common not because of, I didn't write one up here. The boy are smart. The dogs is fast. Not because of that kind of error. Very, very people make that kind of error. Okay? Usually the agreement errors are these kinds of errors. And notice when I just said that. Usually agreement errors are these, what did I say next? Kinds. Plural. Why? Because these is plural. That's an agreement. Okay? You don't say this kinds of, or you don't say these kind. Why? Because these is plural. It is modifying kind. Therefore, kind also needs to be plural. All right? So, a reader should understand that they must interpret what Harry says. I and maybe a half dozen other members of the English department, faculty, still emphasize this as a writing error out of roughly 90 full-time English faculty members. Maybe 6 of us still emphasize this. Why? Because we're hard asses? Possibly. It could also be because we care about thought. Okay? This is important. This is what? Singular. And that is plural. It's clarity of thought, folks. If your thought isn't clear, then guess what? What comes out of your thought, meaning your words, will also be unclear. What's the purpose of all writing? Communication. What is one of the problems in our society today? One of, I know there's a whole slew. Miscommunication. or misinterpreting what other people say. Why? Because of partly this kind of thing. Okay? So, here's another one. One should understand that he has to read to understand. Again, that's an agreement. One has no gender to it. He does. Why throw in the he there? Or it could be, you know, she. Doesn't matter. I'm not picking on men here. If you're going to use one, use it throughout. Okay? So both of these often are allowed in a lot of writing classes. Why? Anybody know? Wild guess. What happens if you use this form solely throughout your writing? In most departments of English, or in most English classes, what is the professor going to say? You're sexist. Why? Because not all agents are male. Not all people who do things are male. I mean, women have been known to do some things, like live and breathe and, you know, etc. So, similarly, if you used only she, that would also be sexist. Okay, so what's one way to get around that? Some people say, go ahead and do this. Well, no, because that's logically stupid. So what's the way to fix that? Readers should understand that they must. So, make your subjects plural, and then use they all you want. Okay? Or, use this. One must understand that one should do one's own work. Not one must understand that they should do their own work. Notice they, there, the there agrees with the they, but the they doesn't agree with the one. So the there doesn't agree with the one. Okay? So, agreement errors. And those are errors. They're not, you know, my preferences. They're errors. They're errors in thought. They're errors in logic. Okay? Subject-verb agreement. We talked about that a little bit. Here's where students often make subject-verb agreement errors today. Let me get rid of this and say something like... desire for wealth. The desire for wealth and use of money for good is a reason for. Why is that a subject-verb agreement error? Okay, here's the verb. It's singular, right? What's the subject? Louder, Morgan.
There's more than two subjects, wealth and money.
Okay. It's actually, that's part of the subject. And that's part of the subject. It's what? It's a compound subject. Compound subject needs plural form of the verb. It would be just like the boy and the dog is having a good time. No, the boy and the dog are having a good time. The boy and the girl is having a good time. Well, maybe if they're together, you know, is. But no, they are having a good time. Okay? Fused sentence. Now, you may not be familiar with this term. It's relatively new. What does relatively mean? You know, 20 years or so. It used to be called a run-on sentence. You know, the example I have down here. I went to the store, I bought some milk. I went to the store. I bought some milk. This is a complete idea, and this is a complete idea. The one is fused to the other. Sometimes they're called spliced sentences, okay? But there's no real splicing there. They're just fused together. So you need some kind of mark of punctuation there, all right? Comma splice, same kind of thing. Only thing is you're trying to join together those two independent ideas solely with a comma. You can't do that. Thinking-wise, yeah, we do that all the time. Because we don't use marks of punctuation in our thoughts, do we? Our thoughts are all just strung together. Okay? Often, the cause for this is people write like they think. Or, put it better, they write like they talk. Now, that can be good in certain contexts. You know, if you're writing a letter to somebody, I know, old-fashioned idea, an email. Writing like you talk conveys what? It gives what to that letter or email? Louder. Personality. It makes the person who's receiving the email or letter feel like, you know, you're right there with them. But in a quote-unquote formal academic paper, like these essays are, you don't want to do that. Why? Because you don't want to use one-on. None of us speak. None of us. Chief offender here. Speak perfect English. Okay? Perfect English is to be reserved for writing. And maybe if you're in court and, you know, sitting in the dock and answering questions to a lawyer, yeah, then you want to be as precise as possible. You don't want to, you know, fudge and such. Okay? Punctuation, there's, you know, either you've left off a mark of punctuation or you've got the wrong mark of punctuation. Awkward. Awkward usually leads to, and often will have right next to it, something like ambiguous or the word vague. Okay? Awkward means if your sentence or paragraph, if it's written beside the whole paragraph, if it were a 4-cylinder car, it's only running on 3 cylinders, man. It's barely getting there. That is, I kind of understand what you're trying to say, but it's not clear, okay? Ambiguous, a little bit different than awkward. What is something if it's ambiguous? It can have multiple meanings. Okay? If it's ambiguous, ambiguity means multiple meanings. Do you ever want your professor to wonder what it is you mean? Not just this class, all of your other classes, whatever your major is. No. You want your professor to be fully clear on what it is you mean in, again, whatever the context is. Okay? So, if it's ambiguous, you know, if you're writing, here's the one exception to that. You're taking a creative writing class and you're writing poetry. Or you're writing song lyrics, which is poetry. More ambiguity, the better. Poems are meant to be ambiguous. Poems are meant to open up multiple avenues of interpretation. These kinds of essay questions, you want it as clear as possible. That's why I said, make sure your essay argues a strongly worded thesis. And I believe when I discussed this, when I ended out in class, I said something like, your thesis ought to grab me by the shirt collar and slap me across the face. It ought to be so clear, I kind of stand back and go, wow, okay, don't want to argue with this person. That's what it is. It's a get-in-your-face argument. Okay? Again, for whatever class. If it's a thesis, it's an argument. Is anybody ever unclear about what Donald Trump means when he says something to or about the media? Do you ever go, gee, I wonder if he likes them or doesn't like them? No, it's always pretty clear. Okay? I just picked him because, you know, he's brash and right out there. Okay? V just means very. It's usually with something like ambiguous or vague. Okay? Question mark, self-explanatory. You lost me. And sometimes I'll write, you lost me. I'm clueless. And, I'll admit, I'm usually clueless. Okay? But this is even beyond my normal cluelessness range. Okay? Which is also the, huh? And if this has multiple question marks after it, that means, whoosh, you really lost me. I'm drowning here and I don't know what you mean at all. Okay? A line through something with a circle, curly Q, whatever, somewhere on it means get rid of it. Delete it. It might be a mark of punctuation, a wrong mark of punctuation. It might be a word that I'm suggesting you don't need. It might be a sentence. It might be a paragraph where I've just drawn a diagonal line with a loop. It just means get rid of the whole paragraph. Doesn't work. It's not needed. It's a whatever. Okay? This little, called a carrot pointing up or one pointing down with something either below it or something above it means insert whatever I put below or above. There might be a word above, like you've left out an article or something, okay? Or it might be a mark of punctuation, comma, semicolon, period, colon, okay? For introducing, for example, quotations. This means reverse the order. Say, I don't know why I'm thinking dogs, probably because I have 4 and they wake me up all night. Dog the, reverse the order, so it's the dog. Usually, it never has it been, just kind of an error. This is more often for style. That is, I'm trying to show you how to make what you've written work a little better, have a little better flow to it, okay? Or to sound better. This means put a space, and it's usually like that, okay? You got a period, and the very next thing is not a space, but a letter. Well, you always have at least one space after a period, okay? Something is circled, you figure it out. Usually it's either a misspelling or an apostrophe. I don't just circle word choices or wrong words or agreement. It's going to be apostrophe or spelling usually. I don't know if I actually use this in anybody's. Sometimes, you're sitting there, you're just flying on along an hour before class and you're typing away and your brain's moving faster than your fingers and you forget a word. Okay? Usually, the reason I catch it is because it's a verb. And you need that verb because you go back to this. Sometimes it'll be this put down rather than this, and that's just my own mistake. That means put what is underlined in italics, like the title of a novel goes in italics. Okay? Title of an essay goes in quotation marks. This means capitalize, like the first word of a sentence. We always capitalize, unless you're E.E. Cummings. None of you are E.E. Cummings, so you can't get away with not using capitalization. Okay. Is this all clear? If it's not, talk to me. So the comma splice thing over here. You can fix comma splices a whole bunch of ways. One, take the comma out, put a period in. Capitalize the next letter. You fixed it. Or put a comma, put a conjunction. And, because, whatever, after it. Or replace the comma with a semicolon. Okay? A lot of different ways you can do it. You can even replace the comma with a colon. I mean, strictly speaking, you can do that. Kind of implies, however, if you use a colon, that what is on this side of the colon is equal to or the same as what is on that side of the colon, or what's coming here is a list. But if it's a list, it's not going to be a separate independent idea. Okay, okay, so all of that done with. Basic structure of an essay. Okay? And I'm doing this not just with you guys. I'm going to do the same thing with my English 3010 students, which is a course for English majors. tomorrow, because they did some of the exact same errors and such that I saw. So, does an essay have to have 5 paragraphs? No, it does not. Does it have to have 3 paragraphs? No, it does not. Does it have to have paragraphs? Yes, it does. It cannot be just one big brain dump. You know, start up here, and 3 pages later, it ends with a period. And it's just one big mess. Why not? What's an essay? It's a series of statements or arguments proving one central argument. The one central argument is what? Your thesis. Your point. The one thing you want to argue. Now, admittedly, for this class, you were limited. You had 4 options, okay, to choose. So you couldn't come up with your own for that, okay? But you had those 4 options, and you could kind of go about those 4 a wide variety of ways. So what do? You start with a title. Everybody in here, thank God, had a title. I've been teaching this kind of course for over 20 years, and I think this is probably the first time that I've taken up one of these essays and not had somebody not include a title. I mean, every other time, I think somebody's not included a title, even though I make it very clear. Failure to include a title will result in an F. And so I take that paper and put an F right at the top. I don't even bother reading it. Nobody did that here, so that was a welcome change. So, title, and then what do you have? Introductory paragraph. What's the purpose of that paragraph? Introductory, okay? It introduces. Okay? It introduces the thesis. That is, the thesis needs to be in there somewhere. Does that mean, as I've had students before do, you put the thesis in bold print? Nope. You put the thesis in a different font? No. Every one of these I've had students do. You put the thesis in a different font? No. You put the thesis in a larger font? No. You put the thesis in a different color? No. You put the thesis in italics? No. Why? Your thesis ought to be clear, just on the basis of what it says. In other words, the thesis ought to stand out from the rest of that paragraph. Why? Because that paragraph is building towards that thesis. Like waves coming in from the shore. You get little waves, and usually what happens? The bigger wave comes in behind, okay? So, each of the sentences in that paragraph, okay, ought to build to the conclusion of that paragraph. The conclusion of that introductory paragraph should be your thesis, okay? So what do the rest of the sentences in that paragraph do? Okay, as I said, they build to, what else do they do? This. They give the big picture, the overview. Think of writing an essay this way. You're getting ready to go somewhere. You put directions into your map on your phone. What does the map initially give you? It gives you the map, right? And then what can you do? You can click on the directions. What does that then do? Takes the map away and gives you point by point. Essay works the same way. The introductory paragraph, that's the map view. That gives your reader the big picture. That tells your reader some, at least, of what the reader is going to encounter later on in that essay. Okay? This is why the title is important. Title gives your reader what? It's a road sign. It says destination. This is why there's a problem when your title doesn't fit with what you say, you know. Let's say, topic 1. Choose one of the novels, discuss how it offers adult readers discovery. And instead, you wrote about, so your title was recovery until we have faces. But instead, you talked about the meaning of faces in Lewis until we have faces. Well, that title does what to your driver? Gives you wrong directions. So your driver goes, well, what the hell? That's, stupid Apple Maps or stupid Google Maps. That's wrong. Okay? So title has to fit. You get your thesis, and notice this is supposed to kind of indicate 3 things. It might be more than 3. Your thesis should be constructed so that it gives you points to argue. So your next paragraph, you start arguing those points. And that paragraph begins, topic sentence. What's the purpose of the topic sentence? It's like the thesis for the entire essay. It's the thesis for that paragraph. So everything in that paragraph flows from that topic sentence and reinforces that topic sentence. In other words, each paragraph is one main idea, and that's all. You don't have a topic sentence, for example, about, love in the Harry Potter novels. And then you start talking about Quidditch. And you're not talking about it in the context of Harry loves Quidditch, but how important Quidditch is for the novels. Why? Because I'm going to do this kind of thing. I'm going to say, new paragraph. Why? You've introduced the second idea. The second idea doesn't reinforce that first idea about love in the Harry Potter novels or something like that. Right? So each sentence kind of points back to and reinforces the topic sentence. Okay? Your next paragraph. You take another point that helps fulfill your thesis. And what do? Topic sentence. That paragraph supports that topic sentence. Notice, this topic sentence, the next paragraph's topic sentence, both what? Point us back to the thesis. Everything in each of the paragraphs echoes the main thesis. It's all taking us back to that. So that when you get down to the conclusion, what do? You go back to the big picture. This. It doesn't mean, I've had students do it, you merely copy and paste your introduction to the end. Because I will write, you merely copied and pasted your introduction to the end. How stupid do you think I am? Sometimes they'll respond. Don't do that. Restate it. Use a different way of stating your thesis. And never introduce a new idea at the end of that conclusion. Never say, oh, and the books are also about, because what have you just done? You've introduced kind of another thesis. No. You want this paragraph to end with your reader going, damn, Joseph is so smart. I wish I could have thought of that. I can't make any comment on it. Okay? That's what you want that thesis to, that final paragraph, that conclusion to do. Okay? So, everything works together seamlessly. If you think of the essay like a piece of fabric, each word is what? It's a thread in that fabric. Okay? Therefore, it has a place, or it should have a place. If it doesn't have a place, then the thread in the fabric becomes what? Something that frays. Well, what can you do with any fabric that has frays in it? You pull at it, and what happens? It all falls apart. Okay? That's why you don't want, words that don't fit. That's why, I'll really emphasize this. Some of your papers, might be confusing with my next class, might have something like this written on it. Be concise, direct, clear, precise. Why? You do those 4 things, I will never have any doubt as to what you mean. What's the problem of my requiring you to do those, however? What's the problem about this for you? And it's not just for me as a writer also. Each one of these, it's hard. It's hard. Writing isn't easy. Anybody who tells you it is, they're lying through their teeth. Writing isn't necessarily also fun. Anybody who says it is, they're lying through their teeth. Okay? It's hard work. It's not hard back-breaking work like digging ditches. I've done them both. Okay? But it's this kind of hard work. When you complete one of these, you ought to be mentally exhausted. Like I used to run marathons. Like running a marathon. Mentally. You just ought to, and I'm sure some of you did just now. Take the damn thing. I'm done. Okay? That's how most students finish their doctoral dissertations or master's theses. They've written and rewritten and rewritten and rewritten so much. Just, I don't care anymore. Just take it. Okay? Why? Because you're working on concise. Use only the words necessary. We kind of tend to think, yeah, but if I use more words, it sounds better. If I use bigger words, $25 words, as opposed to dollar words, it sounds, no, it doesn't. Again, one of maybe a handful of faculty members in the department would say that. Use common, everyday, ordinary words. Don't use jargon. Okay? Jargon is the kiss of death. It will tell your reader one thing, if nothing else. I don't know what I'm talking about, so I'm going to try to sound smart. Know what you're talking about. Focus on the topic that you have. Okay? Couple more minutes. I posted to DTWell this morning the next exam. It is, hold on real quickly, because I did not print a copy out. I shut my Word. 3 essay topics. Okay? They're very clear, much clearer, I hope, than these 4 were, because I have a feeling that some of these might not have been as clear as I thought they were. The essay is due a week from Friday. Right? Change the word requirements a little bit, 750 to 1,100 words. So possible to not write as much, which will require you to be even more concise and use the exact words, etc. Just follow the directions, folks. Follow the directions. Okay, so we'll start with Sabriel. Either we're going to end up dropping Neil Gaiman, or I might do the Bartimaeus book just by video lecture, have you watch those, and we'll just jump from in-class Sabriel to Neil Gaiman. See you on Friday.